It's like this underlying thing.
I have heard about it.
I don't feel anything.
Still definitely an issue and something that needs to be talked about.
Like, obviously, like, we're the South, so I do think it's something that's definitely real.
White privilege is quite the taboo topic. Unwanting to make others uncomfortable or wanting to be politically correct is always a hassle. Nevertheless, as previously stated, it is still important to talk about. White privilege and the University of Tennessee, where it exists, and ways to address it. In order to fully understand how it exists on campus, one must first understand the definition of white privilege.
The idea of white privilege goes back to this woman, Peggy McIntosh, and she talked about, probably now in the 1990s, early 1990s now, about how white identity imbues individuals with particular kinds of privileges. And she has a very famous article where she outlines, I think, over 100 different privileges, and these are things like being able to drive down the street and not be pulled over for being a person of color, to other kinds of privileges. And so really from there it kind of is taken on the idea of kind of the unremarked, she describes it as a knapsack of things that white people carry that just allow white folks or create conditions in which white folks benefit from their whiteness without necessarily even having to be conscious of that.
While the definition has its historical roots, there are still those on UT's campus who question its existence, including this respondent to a survey sent out to a group of UT students. When asked about the definition of white privilege, the respondent referred to it as a racist term used by Black apologetics. He even went as far as to ask, where are the white students on campus that have the privilege, and stated that this mantra starts problems, not necessarily solves them. While the respondent may not feel that white privilege is explicitly presented, if we take a step back, we see quite obvious semblances of it. On UT's campus, white privilege is exhibited through classroom demographics and Greek life. Upon walking into any given classroom on UT's campus, racial diversity is not always evident. Being a predominantly white institution, there is an exclusive privilege given to those who identify with the white race. Oftentimes, being singled out presents its own issues for those outside of the majority. McIntosh refers to it as having to speak or represent your entire race. One major element is this constant need to consistently prove your worth and your validity.
Well, I feel like that's something that's instilled within me, like, even from, like, when I was a little child. So, like, I feel like that's something every African American, like, has to deal with.
Stepping outside of the classroom and into the social sphere, white privilege is apparent in UT's Greek life. There's no question that there's a separation between white Greek life and black Greek life. Moreover, the white Greek culture has a deep-rooted history. Things like frat row and sorority village create its own privilege.
I mean, it's so much history here that they're just gonna have, they already have so many resources that we don't have. You know, they have their alumni that go off and, give back money or whatever. They've been here for so long. Whereas we're still trying to get up to their level.
Now that we've examined the ways through which white privilege exhibits itself on campus, let's examine the potential ways to address it. In order to do so, we'll return to our initial quote. It is obvious that this individual does not believe in the notion of white privilege. But how does one respond to individuals who have such contrasting views?
My heart started beating really fast.
Well, I think there's a lot of different ways to respond to that.
People like that, I feel like you can't persuade in one conversation because they made their mind up a long time ago. Their parents probably made their mind up in like middle school or something about that. So
the nice thing about that response is, like, part of overcoming like structural inequality, racism, whatever, is it's very helpful to know who your allies are and who those who you are opposing you, right? And so that answer right out of the beginning immediately lets you know that is not an ally. It's not someone that you can count on, right, in a struggle for justice. And so then you have to ask yourself, all right, you have here with a student with a certain set of perceptions. Is there a way for me to either engage with that student and potentially transform those perceptions, which maybe there is. I don't know this person, right? Or if that engagement is going to cost so much emotional energy, so much political energy, so much time, and you might not ever succeed. Maybe it's best to move on and try to figure out not ways to engage with that student, but ways to think about transforming that reality in a different kind of way.
If I could, that's where you just try to educate people. I actually did sit a dude down one time and have a good 45 to minute long conversation. He was mixed, but he was raised by his white family, so he was more, I guess, on the white side, and he didn't get why black people were raising hell and Ferguson and stuff. He didn't get it.
Not only is education important, but the establishment of student organizations that aim to incorporate diverse students helps address these issues as well. Culture Shock, a newly established organization on UT's campus, aims to do just that, but in its own way.
Really, Culture Shock, I feel like, is just another outlet for people to express themselves. So the solutions that people are coming up with are just really just the ideas of the people who go to the meetings. I'm not going to say any policies have been changed or anything, but people are going to the meetings and sharing their ideas about policies that are coming up.
All in all, white privilege definitely exists on UT's campus through different student life elements. There are multiple ways to address it. However, there is one we cannot escape.
One of the things I often tell students is, and I don't mean to make light of alcoholism when I say this, I come from a long line of alcoholics. If you know people are alcoholic, right? Every day is literally a challenge. You have a choice. Do you take a drink or not take a drink? Well, in being a white person, I would argue, and being imbued with a particular kind of privilege is a very similar kind of thing. Every day, you have a choice. Are you going to engage in the structures that continue privilege? Are you going to continue to benefit from them? Or are you going to ask questions about them? And are you going to be committed to trying to be anti-racist? And so really, once you become aware of them, that's the choice that you have, particularly as a person like myself who's imbued with all kinds of white heterosexual male privilege.